been an extravagant and an intense day, and the range, just the simple range of these emails cover that entire gamut. They also span young and old. They even come from further different countries. Everybody is struggling for some sort of an articulation. I'll just run through a series of them to give you a taste, at least, of some of them. The United States now has the world's permission to end terrorism. Whoever engineered this insanity failed to realize the counterproductive nature of their actions. Let's hope the U.S. is able to control their justifiable outrage. There's often a personal anecdote. There's a police officer in Toronto who says he had the opportunity of seeing the effects of this attack on downtown Toronto. That's just a kind of low-key effect here, but he points out that on arriving home at his parents' house, he was told that his brother-in-law had been in the towers on Monday at the start of a 3-day conference. Fortunately, they moved to another hotel, so he misses it by just only 24 hours. He ends the email by saying, "Life is so short." Then, as I mentioned, a lot of young people, in proportion to the nature of this event, are writing in. There's one, "My name is Tim Ayelts. I'm only 13 years old, but I know about politics, and this event of terrorism is completely outrageous. In our lifetime, an event will occur that all of us will remember. Until now, they've been small things." And he goes on to say, "Someone has to look at the world and to think of themselves, what has become of this world we live in?" That's a 13-year-old boy. There's an email as far away as China. The person writes, "It's amazing when I hear the news that WTC and the Pentagon are attacked by several unknown hijacked planes controlled by terrorists. This is from China. I deeply express my sorrow to the American people whose family members and relatives are killed or hurt." There's a whole slew, I won't read one of those in particular, but a whole slew of people who were involved here, some planes that have landed in Canada, and some Americans have sent in emails thanking for the support they have received in certain Canadian cities. There's also from Benjamin, simply says, "What's been happening in other parts of the world has now come to our border, and this must be dealt with in proper fashion. However, this must be carried out properly and not with haste. To stop those people, we must be sure not to punish the innocent." There's also talk on a number of these. I don't think I'm getting an earpiece here, but there's a number of talk here saying, that's fine, what the United States could do. There's a streak of straight vengeance in some of these things. There are some comments on the news footage that we've seen. There's also the business here of people truly hoping to express a sympathy. Many people have died today in this deplorable act of violence and nonsense, but as many lives come to live at the same time, people who build this new world with a vision to exterminate violence from the world. That one came from as far away as Puerto Rico. Everywhere we go here, there's another one that reminds us of the international affairs of the last couple of years. If one good thing comes out of this ugly scenario, I hope the U.S. government remembers that New York footage the next time they plan to drop bombs in the heart of downtown Baghdad or Belgrade. A lot of the actions that go back as far as even 10 years ago, but in particular Kosovo and Bosnia, there are echoes in some of the emails dealing with that, not necessarily drawing a causal connection, but pointing out that these events are all part of a pattern. Here's another one of the emails, as I mentioned, from some of the... Well, this will stand in for a kind of raft of emails from some Americans who have been stranded in this country. They're very plain and straightforward messages, but they simply say, "On a terrible day, thank you to Canada for your help. This has been very hard for us all today." So sympathy, outrage, vengeance, attempts to understand and articulate. The range is immense. Peter, I'll return it to you at the end of your long day.
All right, Rex, thank you very much for that, and we will continue to monitor your thoughts coming in by email, also on our phone line, and we will be continuing to reflect some of your comments throughout our coverage over the next couple of days. Well, as Rex mentions, that's it for me on a day and a night that none of us will ever forget. But CBC News is staying on the air. Ben Chin is taking over in the next couple of moments, and he'll have live coverage of any important briefings and more analysis of this horrifying attack. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks for watching on this day and this night.
on the USA. 4 airliners are hijacked, turned into devastating bombs. Thousands of people are feared dead.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me.
The world, shaken, recoils in horror. This is CBC News special continuing coverage of the attack on America. You're looking now at a live picture of the Manhattan skyline without the 2 World Trade Center towers. In that darkness, a massive rescue effort is underway now, a desperate search for survivors. Hello, I'm Ben Chin at News World's National News Center. We welcome viewers on CBC Television, News World, News World International, and the U.S. cable network. We have special coverage ahead and no time for commercials. We've prepared an hour-long newscast on just one story, the attack on the USA. Well, you have to turn the clock back more than half a century to Pearl Harbor to find any comparison. But really, there's never been anything like this. It began with a hijacked commercial flight on its way from Boston to Los Angeles. It took a turn as it passed Manhattan, and a terrible day in U.S. history began. At 8:45, hijackers crashed an airliner into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. Just 20 minutes later, a second plane plowed into the South Tower. Smoke and flames shot above, debris and the doom fell below. Then around 9:40, another explosion, this time in Washington. Another hijacked plane hit the Pentagon. Then just after 10 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed and vanished in a cloud of dust, soon followed by the other building.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
At 10:10 a.m., a 4th airplane crashed outside of Pittsburgh. While the images are extraordinary, the impact only beginning. Hundreds of the dead in New York City were police and firefighters. They were trying to help injured workers from the Trade Center when the tower suddenly collapsed. Steve Irwin has the first of our reports on the attack against the symbols of America's military and financial might.
Smoke poured out of the skyscraper, and the scene was a mess. Then, less than 30 minutes later, it happened again.
Oh my God!
A second plane was hijacked, and as people around the world watched on television, it flew straight into the other tower, punching a huge hole through the building.
And I heard a roar, and I looked around thinking that it had to be a helicopter, and I looked up and I saw the second plane hit. It had to be a commercial-sized airliner.
What went through your mind?
That it couldn't be real. Just that it couldn't be real.
We thought it was an accident. When we heard there was a second one, we definitely thought it was terrorism at that point.
There are typically some 50,000 people working every day in these 110-story buildings. Those inside began to flee while emergency workers rushed in a frenzy to the scene.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion, and everybody just started running for the door. Everybody was trapped. Eventually, when the dust lifted, I saw some light and started screaming for everybody to go out towards the light.
As soon as it got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
Were there other people that were hurt, were lying
there? There was a lot of people hurt. They were lying on the floors, coming down the stairs. A lot of people had asthma attacks while they were coming down. It was bad.
A big explosion happened. Some guy came out. His skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Well, the firefighter, somebody with little light came eventually, and we were following him.
And go to.
What did you do? I'm sorry.
The police officer told everybody to form a human chain, and we held on to each other, and he flashed the light, and he directed us to Building 5, and we went out Building 5.
Did you see people bleeding, and what did you see?
Oh, everybody could see. You want blood? Here's blood. Everybody's bleeding. People are laying all over the floor. It's horrible. And I was there the first time, and this is twice.
But there was an even greater catastrophe. The South Tower, its steel beams apparently melting from heat and fuel, collapsed on itself.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
Unbelievably, a half hour later, that scene too repeated itself. Floor after floor of falling debris. Billowing smoke and soot seemed to cover the lower portion of Manhattan Island. There was panic everywhere. And late this afternoon, word that another building at the World Trade Center complex has collapsed. New York officials were stunned and somber.
And we will strive now very hard to save as many people as possible and to send a message that the city of New York and the United States of America is much stronger than any group of barbaric terrorists.
It's impossible even to guess right now at how many casualties there were in this attack. But it's easy to see in the faces of New Yorkers that it will be a very long time before life here returns to normal. For CBC News, I'm Steve Irwin in New York.
And let's go live now to Manhattan for the latest on the rescue effort. The CBC's Joanna Romeliotis is standing by. Joanna, you are pretty much in the thick of things right now. What do you see there and what are you hearing?
Ben, the scene is one of complete devastation, and it spans whole blocks, whole parameters. We've been walking through side streets here in Manhattan, close about 3 blocks away where the World Trade, and this are coated, completely coated with a thick layer of dust, and they're dark. And then you walk onto an opening, and there are lights there where the place. It's a very surreal. Right now, the focus of the operations is rescue. Up until 12 o'clock midnight tonight, firefighters were still trying to control the blaze. They did manage to do that, and that's when sniffer dogs were sent in, followed by another shift of firefighters and rescue workers, all looking for any sign of life. At this point, at least 2 people have been found, both police officers, one apparently who had to have his leg amputated underneath the rubble. There are triage units set all around here, but at the moment, they're only treating rescue officers and police officers. As yet, they haven't had any contact with the injured who are pinned underneath. They're just staggering, Ben. People here are saying that it's going to rack up easily into the thousands, and you can see rescue workers here that they are so overwhelmed by the enormity of the task ahead of them.
Well, what are rescue workers saying, Joanna, about what they face? That they must have not really been prepared for this or seen anything like this even in their line of work.
No, they haven't, and that's part of the reason that they're walking around here, hundreds of them, and it's an incredible sense of quiet. Everybody seems to be completely wrapped up in the horrors that they've witnessed. One man came up to us and told us he helped one person, an injured man, out earlier today, and he was just shaking his head thinking, I've helped one person, and God knows how many more people are under there. The official line here is survivors, that there are people pinned underneath, and that the focus is on getting them out. But to Ben, there is no one here, I believe, that has ever witnessed anything of this scale.
Joanna, thank you.
You're welcome.
CBC's Joanna Romeliotis with the story in New York City. And for nearly an hour after the first explosion at the World Trade Center, that was the only story. A civilian disaster with thousands of victims. Then the attack on the United States took another, more chilling turn. Another jetliner, another collision. And this time the target was the heart of the U.S. military, the Pentagon. Adrian Arsenault reports.
Before their eyes, the terror of New York flew into their own backyard. At 9:45 a.m., an explosion at the Pentagon.
And the next thing I know, there was this tremendous explosion as it hit the Pentagon. I looked right.
The military nerve center of the United States, workplace of more than 20,000 people under attack. A hijacked American Airlines 757 with 64 people on board had just left Dulles, Virginia, en route to Los Angeles. Then it changed course and crashed into the West Wing. all 5 floors collapsed.
And an enormous gap has been cut in this building.
Mercifully, Pentagon officials say the plane hit a newly renovated and minimally staffed section of the building. But death here would be unavoidable. As the effects of the escalating catastrophe started to sink in, the United States military at home and overseas was put on the highest alert. And in Washington, a state of emergency was declared.
Everybody back. Everybody back.
The White House, the Capitol building, all empty. And by mid-morning, every federal building in Washington was evacuated, sending nearly 250,000 people into the streets. Across town, early, unconfirmed reports of an explosion at or near the State Department. On any other day, that would be crisis enough. Here, today, it just gets added to a horrible list.
Very angry. Very angry that somebody has such callous disregard for human life.
And it would continue. Just before noon, a 4th commercial jet crashed just outside Pittsburgh. A passenger aboard the United Airlines plane had called police to report a hijacking, only moments before it went down in a cornfield.
I happened to heard a plane come through. It sounded like it was running normal. When it come down over top of me, I seen it go nosedive straight into the ground down here.
Westline commuters were operating trains as quickly as possible.
Across the country, many Americans scrambled to get away from big cities and possible targets. Most high-profile tourist attractions were closed. Most train and bus stations jammed.
Westline track 1. It's load and go. We'll fill them and they'll go out.
And by midday, for the first time ever, the Federal Aviation Administration grounded every plane in the United States and diverted incoming flights. As of right now, nothing will be flying into or out of here until at least noon Wednesday. But the skies aren't completely silent out there. When you step outside, you can occasionally hear the rumble. It sounds like thunder overhead. It's actually the sound of planes. It's become a bit of an unsettling sound for people here. But what people are actually hearing are fighter jets that have been patrolling the airspace over Washington for most of the day. We've been told repeatedly that these planes can and will shoot down any aircraft that enter restricted airspace and that are perceived to be a threat. Ben?
Adrian, back to the fire at the Pentagon. Any word on how the firefighting is going there?
This is tough work from what we hear. There are parts of the Pentagon that are actually still in flames. What's happened, or what we understand, is that the fuselage is obviously still in the plane, that there are 30,000 pounds of jet fuel acting as an accelerant, and that it is simply too dangerous for the firefighters to get into many parts of that building. It's nighttime. It's already tricky enough. They don't know how many people are still in there. The reports of casualties are varying from 100 to possibly as many as 800. So the firefighters have pulled back a little bit. They are trying to do what they can to contain the damage, but they are not fighting this fire aggressively. Come daybreak, they will go in again. I think, as I understand it, the plan is that by dawn, they will try to peel back the walls of the affected area of the Pentagon, this West Wing, newly renovated area. Just peel it back and go in. We've seen scenes tonight of fire and Pentagon officials being lowered by crane into parts of the now exposed areas of the Pentagon to assess the damage. But right now, all they can really do is look.
Adrian, thank you for this. CBC's Adrian Arsenault joining us from our bureau in Washington. While the Pentagon is on fire across the Potomac from Washington, as you just heard, with 2 mammoth New York skyscrapers reduced to dust and debris, it is all but impossible to give you an accurate count on the death here. Most reports estimate deaths in the thousands. The 4 airliners alone had 266 people aboard, and there are no known survivors. A New York Firefighters Union official believes more than 250 firefighters died as they rushed to the rescue, and as many as 80 police officers are missing in New York. As you just heard Adrian mention, there are reports of ranging from anywhere from 100 to 800 people killed in the Pentagon attack. Canada's Foreign Affairs Department says it will be at least a day before it knows how many Canadians have been killed in this. We do know at this hour, though, that at least 1 Canadian was on board one of the hijacked airplanes that rocketed into the World Trade Center. Garnet Bailey died in that terrible collision. Bailey was a native of Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. He was also well known as Ace Bailey. He was once a Stanley Cup champion with the Boston Bruins and worked as the director of pro scouting for the Los Angeles Kings. Bailey was on United Airlines Flight 175 heading to Los Angeles from his home in Boston when the jet was taken over. Garnett Bailey was 53. U.S. President George W. Bush was not in Washington at the time of the Pentagon attack, but as you may have seen, he is there now. He is assuring the nation that even though a powerful symbol of the U.S. government has been attacked, the government itself is still operating smoothly. With more on the American president's response to the attacks, here's the CBC's David Halton.
Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready.
It's just after 9 a.m. President Bush is at an education event when an aide gives him the first whispered news of the New York bombings. His face clouds with anxiety.
At the count of 3, everyone should be on page 1.
Minutes later, his first official response.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
For more than 3 hours, though, as U.S. forces at home and abroad are put on the highest alert, nothing more is heard from Bush or any other senior official. Public fears aren't eased when Bush flies to an Air Force base in Louisiana, apparently still unsure that it would be safe to return to Washington.
The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test.
A terrible, terrible tragedy has befallen my nation, but has befallen...
More words of defiance from Secretary of State Colin Powell on a visit to Peru.
They can destroy buildings, they can kill people, and we will be saddened by this tragedy, but they will never be allowed to kill the spirit of democracy.
As thousands flee downtown Washington,
Clear down the whole area.
There's confusion, shock, and disbelief.
We can't move. We can't get anywhere. Everybody's concerned that there might be other buildings targeted.
Now I know what my parents felt like on Pearl Harbor Day.
It's really inconceivable to us that someone would do that, and so you really can't understand the enemy.
But in this case, was the enemy Osama bin Laden? U.S. officials already say bin Laden is their prime suspect, that only his terrorist organization, Al-Qaeda, has the resources and sophistication to carry out today's coordinated attacks. But in Afghanistan, where bin Laden is based, representatives of the Taliban government denied that he's involved.
We strongly condemn it. We want investigation to be carried out.
We could hear detonations coming from that northern area as well.
Later, explosions and rocket fire lit up the night sky around the Afghan capital. Washington quickly denied that this was a U.S. retaliation attack and said the fighting was started by Afghan rebels.
In no way is the United States government connected to those explosions.
This evening, Bush returned to the White House after an unexplained visit to the Strategic Air Command headquarters in Nebraska. This was part of his address to the nation tonight.
I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Bush also ordered federal departments to reopen tomorrow, obviously wanting to send a signal that the government won't be knocked off track by the bombings. But no one has any illusions here. It may be a long time before Americans feel safe again. David Halton, CBC News, Washington.
And before we move on, we want to pass on the latest information we have. There has been a lot of speculation about who may have been behind this, and a lot of the experts have been talking about someone capable of the sophistication, planning, and the money involved in pulling something like this off. And the name Osama bin Laden, a terrorist linked to the U.S. Embassy attacks as well as the World Trade Center attack back in 1993, and of course the attack on the USS Cole. Osama bin Laden has been mentioned by numerous people as a possible suspect here. However, in a Urdu language newspaper in Pakistan, the Khabrain, Osama bin Laden, through sources, is quoted as saying, "The terrorist act is the action of some American group. I have nothing to do with it." That is what they are saying, that Osama bin Laden is saying at this hour. Back in this country, Ottawa moved quickly in the wake of the attacks. Police forces in the national capital were moved to high alert. Some embassies were shut, and there were special precautions at one of the most visible U.S. properties in Ottawa. Here's Paul Hunter.
It's the biggest and most important U.S. government building in Canada. And so today at the American Embassy in Ottawa, they took no chances. All non-essential workers were told to leave.
Sir, can we get your reaction to what's going on inside?
No comment right now, thank you.
And those who work nearby wondered, could the U.S. Embassy be a target?
I'm really scared. I want to go as far away from here as possible.
It set the tone for the day in Ottawa, where some roads were briefly blocked off, tourists told to leave the area.
You have to evacuate there?
Yeah.
We have been asked by the police to evacuate the west.
Even the Chateau Laurier Hotel was evacuated because of a brief bomb scare. And like its other embassies around the world, Israel's, in this Ottawa office building, was evacuated too. So were nearby offices.
Just sheer relief fell over the whole office.
Police doubled their numbers on the streets. Hospitals and ambulances were put on alert. The RCMP says it's doing all it can.
But I can assure you we are doing everything possible to gather the very best intelligence so that we can use that intelligence to respond appropriately to whatever threat there is to Canadians and obviously other embassies and so on in Canada.
Of course, after all the worries, the evacuations, the extra police, nothing terrible happened in Ottawa. But on this day, no one's complaining about all the extra precautions. Better that than the now all too imaginable possibilities. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Jean Chrétien says the government has beefed up security in the wake of the attacks and across the national capital, signs that this country is indeed taking security very seriously. Here's the CBC's Jason Moskowitz.
What started as a normal day on Parliament Hill soon became a day of heightened security. The barricades went up, visitors were asked to leave. Cabinet ministers across the country tried to get up to speed. That was especially the case for Lawrence Macaulay, the minister responsible for the RCMP.
Of course, I don't have the in-depth detail of every step that the Security Intelligence Agency take, but obviously we have a very strong security intelligence teams in the U.S. and in this country. Obviously, there's been a desperate, terrifying act of terrorism that we will all have to deal with.
In the early afternoon, Prime Minister Chrétien expressed sympathy from all Canadians.
Canadians show their solidarity with our neighbors, and the news to come when we discover the number of people who died will be probably very tragic.
Chrétien then talked of Canadian security measures but stayed away from specifics.
We have talked with the RCMP, with the Solicitor General and the head of the RCMP, and with the Chief of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army, and everybody has increased the level of security everywhere.
Heightened security was evident over Whitehorse this afternoon. Canadian fighter jets tracked a Korean plane. There were fears of a possible hijacking, but in the end the plane reported problems because of a fuel shortage, the result of circling for too long. In Toronto, Premier Mike Harris offered all the medical help his province could muster.
I have instructed all branches of the provincial government that Ontario will provide whatever support is needed.
Alberta Premier Ralph Klein wondered if the G8 summit scheduled for his province next June should be cancelled.
It's my personal thought that it would be absolute folly to proceed with a summit of that magnitude.
Well, that report from the CBC's chief political correspondent, Jason Moskowitz. It has been a chaotic day at Canadian airports. All flights out were cancelled, and hundreds of flights headed for the U.S. landed in this country instead. The CBC's Susan Ormiston reports.
I'm afraid it's the end of the world.
Just one passenger on hundreds of aircraft destined for the U.S., but rerouted to Canadian airports. This man in Toronto hosted 200 New York guests at his daughter's wedding last night. They're stranded.
The groom's sister left a 4-week-old child with a nurse who they can't even get through. The nurse is supposed to leave. They can't even, the phones are all tied up. It's total chaos.
By mid-morning, all airports in Canada were closed. All scheduled flights cancelled.
Our priority has been to receive diverted flights that were bound to destinations within the U.S.
The same everywhere. In Halifax, 7,000 travelers stuck, many still on the tarmac tonight. In Newfoundland, up to 15,000 unexpected passengers.
City. Gander. Oh.
Vancouver took the load of Asian flights. The massive effort got thanks from Washington.
So we owe our Canadian neighbors a debt of gratitude for helping us as we redirected.
Many passengers coming off the flights here in Toronto had very few details of what had happened. They were confused and frustrated by the change in their travel plans. Their shock would come later.
Total shock and disbelief. Sounds like something out of a movie.
They turned off TVs at Pearson Airport, but in Gander, stranded travelers were horrified.
There's the plane. You can't miss that.
All over, passengers had to wait hours for luggage and then try to get a rental car, a bus, or a room. These travelers herded into a hotel ballroom. There are no more rooms.
Back on the other side of the fence, please.
Airports were on high security alert. Tactical police on patrol, dogs and bomb detection equipment in use, and in the air, too, tighter security. Unlike a weather delay or an airline strike, travelers weren't as much testy as nervous.
I just want to get out of here. I feel like a sitting duck, to be quite honest.
Even the airport chaplain had a busy day.
Every few feet, somebody would stop and talk to us. Just wanted to talk. Just wanted to let out steam.
Transport Canada will decide when planes will resume flying. For now, Canadian airports are still closed and travelers' plans in disarray.
The world's not what it was 24 hours ago.
Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, as Susan mentioned, Vancouver is one of the cities that welcomed rerouted travelers. The CBC's Mark Davey is at a facility in Vancouver, and he joins us now. Mark, give us a look around. Tell us what's happening behind you.
Well, Ben, I'm at one of the local hotels just outside of Vancouver's International Airport, where, as you can see behind me, passengers are slowly trickling in groups of 10 to 12. These passengers are telling some horrific stories. At this hour, there are still between 6,000 and 8,000 passengers who remain stranded out at Vancouver's International Airport. They're telling horrific stories of waits up to 5 hours at the airport. There are still, at this time, 34 foreign planes that are out there coming in from Shanghai, destined for San Francisco. And even at this hour, 15 planes still have passengers on board and are still out on the tarmac and still waiting to get to gates.
Mark, it must be difficult to balance their own inconvenience with the pictures they must be seeing at the airport, maybe back at the hotel, of what happened at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon today. How are people coping there?
It's very tough for these passengers. They're telling about horrific stories. First of all, they didn't even know getting on board these planes. No information was provided for a lot of these passengers coming in, had no idea even coming to Vancouver whatsoever. One passenger told me she was on a flight from Shanghai to San Francisco, rerouted to Vancouver, landed at 1:30, waited 5 hours on the ground, and then on top of that had to wait just to clear security and customs for another 5 hours on top of that. Up to 10 hours at the airports watching TVs. It's horrific for these passengers coming in. And the worst part of all is they have no idea when they'll be leaving.
Mark, thank you for this. CBC's Mark Davey joining us from Vancouver this hour. Well, security is tighter than it's ever been at border crossings between Canada and the United States. As Ian Hannah-Mansing reports, U.S. authorities are poring over the identification of every traveler trying to enter their country.
At the Peace Arch border crossing atop the monument to the longest undefended border in the world, two flags at half-mast, half-staff, a symbol of the tragedy that trumped the optimism of the words inscribed on the arch, "May these gates never be closed." This gate to the United States was sealed shut for about 20 minutes this morning. And when it reopened, it was at the highest level of security, what customs officers call a Code 1. The last time border checks were this thorough was on the eve of the Millennium celebrations in 1999, after Ahmed Rassam was caught trying to smuggle explosives from British Columbia to Washington state. U.S. citizens were allowed slowly back into their country. Most non-Americans were turned away. These Canadians were headed to Oregon for a convention.
And then he said, "I'm sorry, you cannot go through the very easy thing. Only Americans are allowed to go through."
On the Canadian side, heightened security as well. And at a crossing where usually more than 300 cars an hour would stream past, by midday, only about 75 vehicles each hour were trickling through. One veteran police officer said he's never seen this level of security at the border.
I've been policing in this area for over the course of 35 years. As far as on an emergent reaction, no, I've never encountered this type of slowdown.
It was a similar scene at some of the other major crossings. The Windsor-Detroit tunnel was shut down for about 5 hours. And on the Ambassador Bridge, massive backups. At Niagara Falls, no complaints about the slow traffic, but outrage from Americans over the attacks.
Whoever did it, I hope they really get the crap knocked out of them. I mean, they will, as the Americans stand together.
It's a sad day for America. Still proud to be an American, but we need to straighten this out real quick and go after the parties. All-out war, that's what it is, just like Pearl Harbor.
By evening, very few cars were arriving at the Peace Arch border crossing. Those trying to get into Canada were met by an immigration officer who verified ID papers and then a gauntlet of customs officers. An official said this methodical and unusual level of security would continue indefinitely. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News at the Peace Arch border crossing near White Rock, British Columbia.
Well, the tensions weren't felt only at the borders and airports. The U.S. section of the St. Lawrence Seaway was shut down. So was Greyhound bus service in the Northeast. Amtrak suspended train service temporarily between Boston and Washington. 12,000 employees of NASA were sent home from the Kennedy Space Center. Disney World evacuated 4 of its theme parks in Florida. And while streetlights still burn in New York City, the shows didn't go on. All Broadway performances were canceled today. World leaders have condemned today's attacks. Russia's president calls them a blatant challenge to humanity. Britain's prime minister says there's a new evil in our world. And Buckingham Palace says the Queen has been watching in growing disbelief and total shock. As Don Murray reports, that's the view shared by millions of TV viewers around the world.
The world watched transfixed. This was London. It could have been any major city in Europe this afternoon. Television pictures gathered crowds. They evoked curiosity, disbelief, and then horror. Traders were moved from the London Stock Exchange. They too watched the televised pictures in disbelief. Some left one of London's main financial office buildings. American firms sent their workers home. Rapidly, police forces around the continent were put on alert. Security was noticeably heavier at the American embassy in London. By the end of the afternoon, the impact was most obvious at airports. London's Heathrow was filled with passengers whose planes, headed for the U.S., had been turned back in the air. The chorus of condemnation from European political leaders was swift and unanimous. Germany's Chancellor Gerhard Schröder talked of the revulsion his government and his country felt at these attacks. Russian President Vladimir Putin described the attacks as an evil blow against all civilized people.
То, что произошло сегодня, лишний раз подчеркивает актуальность.
What happened today, he says, underlines the importance of Russia's proposal to unite all the forces of international society to fight terrorism. Britain's Prime Minister Tony Blair emerged from an emergency meeting of his senior ministers to say his country would stand shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. in a crusade to eliminate such attacks.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world. The people who perpetrate it have no regard whatever for the sanctity or value of human life. And we, the democracies of the world, must come together to defeat it and eradicate it.
This evening, NATO ambassadors met in Brussels just hours after all non-essential NATO employees had been sent home from the alliance's headquarters. Tomorrow, the European foreign ministers will meet in emergency session. But this furious round of diplomatic discussion barely conceals the obvious. No one in power on this side of the Atlantic has any real idea how this happened or what will happen next. Don Murray, CBC News, London.
Middle Eastern leaders were also offering their sympathy and condolences to the United States. But as Neil MacDonald reports, there was a very different reaction on the street.
In Arab East Jerusalem, groups of people took to the street, celebrating, toasting Osama bin Laden, and generally hailing whomever managed to inflict such a lethal blow against Israel's closest ally and greatest protector. There were similar celebrations in the cities of the West Bank and in the Palestinian refugee camps of Lebanon. Most Arab leaders, though, understanding the sheer foolishness of taunting Americans at a time like this, were greatly restrained.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
Palestinian extremist groups, though, issued cold denials and took the opportunity to lecture the United States. We are opposed to U.S. oppression, said this leader of Hamas, itself a group that has dispatched suicide bombers. We call upon the U.S. to take fair stands and not take Israel's side.
We deny our responsibility, but we call upon the American administration to review their attitude and their policy towards the Palestinian question, because this policy arouses the anger and the hatred of our people and of all Arab and Islamic peoples.
Israeli leaders universally expressed grief and condolences. Israel's Foreign Minister Shimon Peres says it pains Israel's heart and urged the world to organize against what he called terror, saying several countries are known to be terror centers and the world must not leave them free to play with people's lives. I hope the world understands today that its first enemy is Islamic terror, said Israel's defense minister. On the popular Israeli political program Popolitica, an Israeli general called for the immediate liquidation of Yasser Arafat. And from a former prime minister,
we here in Israel have been standing and fighting at the front line against terrorism for years, but now terrorism is struck at the heart of freedom. And this is exactly what this battle is. It's a battle between the forces of tyranny and terrorism and the forces of freedom and democracy.
And that is no doubt how the Arabs of the Middle East fear the lines will be drawn from now on, with them cast irretrievably as terrorists, and the word Islam synonymous with atrocity in the Western mind. It's probably fair to say that most people here, Arab and Jew, believe their lives changed today, and that the geopolitical lines here have shifted radically. Certainly the current Palestinian uprising with its overt Islamic dimension is going to be seen in quite a different light, beginning tomorrow. Neil MacDonald, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Former U.S. President Bill Clinton urged Americans to rally behind President Bush in the aftermath of the attacks. Clinton says there should be no second guessing, and Americans should give Bush's national security team the time it takes. The question of who carried out today's attacks is in the minds of everyone in the U.S. But we do know that in the recent past, Canada has been used as a base for attempted terror attacks on the United States. The CBC's Terence McKenna has this report.
The most haunting foreshadowing of today's terror attack happened in Marseille, France in 1994. French commandos stormed an Air France jet which had been hijacked by Algerian Islamic militants. All the hijackers were killed. 159 hostages were freed. 7 had been killed. French authorities said the hijackers wanted to crash the plane fully loaded with fuel into Paris, if possible, into the Eiffel Tower. The trail from that case led French investigating magistrate Jean-Louis Bruguière to uncover a worldwide network of Islamic terrorists. His work has brought him to Canada and the United States.
This study is spreading over the world like a web. So it's very difficult to grasp this new threat. But it's very, very dangerous because their target is very different. They try to target not only France, but America.
French investigators established links that led from the 1994 hijacking through the Paris subway bombs in 1995 and 96. And the trail eventually led them to a group of terrorists in Montreal, which included Ahmed Ressam, the man arrested at the American border with powerful explosives in the trunk of his car in 1999. Salim Jiwa covered the Rassam case for the Vancouver province.
Well, I see the Rassam situation as a precursor of what was to come. I see that as I mean, the astonishing part is what Rassam was saying was the number of people who are trained. For example, he stated that 60 people are ready and on standby in Italy. He named a number of groups in Sweden, number of people in Germany. So I saw that as a precursor. I was talking to a security source in the United States and just a month ago, and he indicated that the U.S. was very nervous still that something would happen and they would be unable to stop it. He said to me that these people are not going to stop, and you know it.
Ahmed Rassam easily obtained a false Canadian passport and used it to travel to the city of Peshawar in the northwest frontier province of Pakistan. There he made contact with the Osama bin Laden organization and entered a terrorist training camp in nearby Afghanistan for months of instruction in bomb-making and assassination techniques. Islamic militants from many nations are trained in the Afghanistan camps. The bin Laden organization has been monitored for years by the U.S. security apparatus and the Situation Room at the White House. James Steinberg was Deputy National Security Advisor in the Clinton administration.
It's not simply a question of an individual belonging to one particular organization with one particular target, whether it's the GIA in Algeria or the Egyptian Islamic Jihad in Egypt, but rather a kind of loose network of people who have common affiliations, common training, common associations, frequently linked to Afghanistan, which becomes sort of a pool of individuals who may be available to be involved in terrorist operations elsewhere in the world.
The Rassam case has brought to light numerous connections between the Osama bin Laden organization and Canada.
Yes, indeed. There are other names, as you know, people who have direct telephonic links in Canada with Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, Abu Zubaydah. There are people like that in Calgary. There are people like that in Vancouver. There are people like that in Montreal. There are people like that in Toronto. Numerous telephonic links have been found with very sinister people and very dangerous people in Canada.
Suspected terrorists in Canada are monitored by the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, CSIS, and agents like Dan Lambert.
Counterterrorism is the main priority of the CSIS in terms of its mandate. We have 2/3 of our resources are dedicated to counterterrorism. We work extremely closely with the RCMP, with the Department of Justice, with CIC and Customs within Canada, as well as U.S. authorities. And in fact, I mean, we have liaison relationships with 130 different countries and over 250 different agencies.
What's valuable about the Rassam case is that it reinforces the necessity of this kind of cooperation. As you say, there were links in not only between individuals operating in the United States, individuals operating in Canada, but also in Europe. And as we began to uncover them, I think it reinforced among officials involved in law enforcement and intelligence the critical need for this kind of transnational cooperation.
Why would Islamic terrorists come to Canada? David Harris is former Chief of Strategic Planning at the Canadian Security and Intelligence Agency.
I think in terms of Islamic extremists in Canada, they regard the proximity of Canada to the U.S. as making Canada a kind of Islamic extremist aircraft carrier for the launching of major assaults against the U.S. mainland. And that's something we've got to remember.
Today's massive coordinated attack shows a level of sophistication well beyond what had been anticipated or predicted in the North American intelligence community. Most intelligence analysts thought a conspiracy of this magnitude would show up in the massive wiretapping and monitoring of suspected terrorists.
Indeed, this is a complete failure of intelligence. The United States, Canada, and allied intelligence services for a long time will be dissecting how such a major conspiracy that must have used the airwaves, may have used the internet as a contact point, could get through and be carried out without anybody waking up. This is havoc that has been created, and I suppose many heads will roll, and there will be lots of post-mortems conducted on how such a major conspiracy could be concealed.
Congresswoman Jane Harman served on the U.S. Counterterrorism Intelligence Committee and has long pleaded for more resources to deal with international terrorism.
What is very worrisome is the goals of terrorists have changed. It used to be that terrorists would try to kill a few people and make a political point. But as we stated in this terrorism report that I worked on last year, the goal no longer is a seat at the table. The goal is to blow up the table.
In the aftermath of the Ahmed Rassam case, there was a lot of finger-pointing at Canada, especially because Mr. Rassam was so easily able to take advantage of Canadian immigration and refugee regulations, and because it was so easy for him to obtain a false Canadian passport. There was a lot of American pressure on Canada to establish more stringent requirements in these areas, and after today, that pressure will surely increase. Terence McKenna, CBC News, Montreal.
Soon after the carnage began, people in this country were quick to jump into action. Here's the CBC's Matthew Pace.
They heard the news and saw the images, then lined up to help. Giving blood in Vancouver.
We've had an unbelievable response from our donors.
In Ottawa.
Horrified. It felt like you're looking at a movie, but it's obviously not.
In Calgary.
Really wanted to, give and do what I had to do from this end.
Canadians doing what they had to do to help their closest neighbors.
There's going to be a need for immediate care and comfort. These people have obviously suffered tremendous shocks to their system.
That will direct the operation on a national level.
The Canadian Red Cross is coordinating much of the relief effort.
Tracing service, can I help you?
Helping Canadians find American friends and relatives who may have been caught in the violence.
They really want to know, are their family members involved? Are they hurt? Can they help them?
But mostly they're doing whatever they're asked to do.
Coordination is the key thing. The important thing in terms of help coming in from the outside is that it comes through the appropriate channels and that they coordinate that.
Ontario Premier Mike Harris says people in his province and others are ready to pitch in.
We have offered assistance to the United States and New York governments. I have instructed all branches of the provincial government that Ontario will provide whatever support is needed.
Doctors, nurses, emergency workers are all prepared to offer their support.
The first and foremost thing that we'll look at is whether we can offer any assistance in the healthcare field because the priority becomes on the living.
So people such as Aliyah Galani are just waiting for the call.
If I can just help one person, it'll be a lot, but I know it's going to be a lot. I know maybe we're going to work like 16 hours or 18 hours a day when we go there, and I'm ready for that.
Ready to help out in a relief effort that's only just begun. Matthew Pace, CBC News, Montreal.
The Canadian Blood Services says it's expecting a huge demand from the U.S. for blood donations. To find out the location of clinics and hours, you can call 1-888-2DONATE. And to check on Canadians who may have been caught in the attacks, Foreign Affairs has a 24-hour emergency service. That number is 1-800-387-3124. Be advised, both numbers are extremely busy. North American stock markets shut down immediately after the terrorist attack, and they are likely to remain closed Wednesday. Even before the attack, there was concern about the state of the U.S. economy. Now there's fear the fallout may nudge the United States into a recession. Havard Gould has more on what may lay ahead.
Closed in the chaos, it isn't clear when the Canadian stock exchanges will reopen. The American stock exchanges will remain shut for at least another day, as the world's biggest financial center struggles to understand the extent of the losses, the buildings, the infrastructure, the people.
Clearly, there are going to be some disruptions to financial businesses and to other businesses that were located in the affected areas.
Stock markets around the world slid when the attack started, but economists can only guess at the full impact to be felt in the days ahead.
The big picture right now is extremely uncertain. We already had a lot of doom and gloom about the global economy. This is just going to add to that. I'm very concerned for colleagues in New York, obviously, and it's unprecedented what we're seeing happening, so impossible to predict, but I can't say it's going to be good news.
The key, the U.S. consumer, the last pillar holding up the economy in North America. Americans have been resolutely spending in the face of mounting debt layoffs, and shutdowns. Now this.
There is no question that the confidence in the U.S. has been shattered. We have been in a recession, but this is going to be another blow.
How U.S. consumers react may well decide whether the world is plunged into a global recession.
Over the past year, we've seen financial turbulence, but we've never seen the type of financial turbulence precipitated by these types of terrorist acts before, so to predict their outcomes is impossible.
So only when the first shock is dealt with and when institutions like the stock markets get up and running again, only then will it be possible to truly assess the economic damage done here to the economies of the United States and the world. Howard Gould, CBC News, Toronto.
It took just one morning to change the world forever. A series of stunning attacks on the most powerful nation on earth. Here's the CBC's Brian Stewart with a detailed look at 2 hours of terror.
Early morning rush hour. Thousands of New Yorkers battle morning traffic to make it to their jobs within the twin 110-story north and south towers of the World Trade Center. Though a terrorist target 8 years ago, at the Trade Center, 50,000 are expected in its offices. Today, there's no special alert or sense of menace. To the north, at Boston Airport, just 1 minute before 8, American Airlines Flight 11 takes off headed for Los Angeles. It's a Boeing 767 carrying 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots. All seems normal as it crosses Newark and climbs to 10,000 meters over the Adirondacks. But suddenly, air traffic controllers see it veer off course and start heading for New York. For the next 30 minutes, alarm controllers watch an apparently hijacked plane streaking towards Manhattan. Then within minutes, they see a second plane, United Airlines Flight 175 with 56 aboard, also veering off course, aiming for Manhattan. At 8:45, all hell breaks loose above New York. The first plane, Flight 11, crash dives straight into the North Tower of the Trade Center, causing catastrophic loss of life. 18 minutes later, at 9:03, a stunned city sees the second plane swoop unerringly into the side of the South Tower, a scene which stuns the world. Even as this is happening, there's more on the way. In Washington's Dulles Airport, Flight 77, a Boeing 757, takes off for Los Angeles. Suddenly veers off direction, and at 9:38, crashes at the west wing of the Pentagon, the very command center of America's military. Minute by minute, horrors mount. 10 a.m., the unthinkable. In New York, the entire South Tower of the Trade Center collapses, like a giant avalanche of concrete and steel, burying so many wounded and rescue workers. 10:10 in the morning. United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 with 45 on board, traveling from Newark to San Francisco, plows into a field disintegrating in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. There are reports of an explosion just before the crash. Then at 10:29, the drumbeat of calamity reaches its peak. Incredibly, the North Tower of the Trade Center also collapses. An event so stunning, so threatening, that much of Manhattan is evacuated. In just 2.5 hours this morning, from the first takeoff in Boston to the tower collapse, America and the world have changed in ways still uncountable and incalculable.
CBC's Brian Stewart. Let's look again now to live pictures from New York City. Strangely unfamiliar, that skyline, without the landmark World Trade Center towers. But within that darkness, closer down, hundreds of rescue workers are struggling to save people who are still trapped in the wreckage. Joanna Romeliotis told us about 2 police officers that authorities were trying to rescue. We also heard in the last hour a Pakistani newspaper quoting Osama bin Laden as denying responsibility for this. And as speculative news comes out, the Boston Herald reporting a Canadian connection at this hour. The newspaper in Boston quotes sources as saying Massachusetts authorities have seized a rental car found some flight manuals on board, believed 2 of the men were brothers from the United Arab Emirates, and then also goes on to report that at least 2 of them had traveled through Canada and on to Portland, Maine, and then on to Logan Airport in Boston. Our continuing special coverage will be back after.